Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Path 11 podcast today. I am really excited about this podcast. I feel like it is going to be such a refreshing conversation and one that I have not yet had on the Path 11 podcast. My guest today is Diana Richardson, and we are actually going to be talking about mindfulness and sexuality, spirituality and sexuality, and we are going to learn the difference between hot sex and cool sex. And Cool Sex is the name of Diana's book. She is considered one of today's leading authorities on human sexuality. And I have to say that a lot of times when my clients come in, some of them are a little embarrassed to talk about sex, and some will actually ask me the question, is it okay if we talk about sex here? And I say, absolutely. I mean, it is a major part of the human experience. So Diana has previously written 7 books on how, in practical ways, a person can experience a more fulfilling sex and love life. She is born in South Africa, and she first qualified as a lawyer and then went on to be a massage therapist. And now here she is writing books and really helping people to get in touch, I feel, after I read her book, with my own essence, my own spirit in the physical body, and merging the two together when I am intimate with my partner. So it's fabulous. And I'm so excited to talk to you because we haven't even touched this issue yet on the Path 11 podcast. And I'm thinking, why not? Here I am thinking like, I always talk about sex with my clients and people, and we're not talking about it on the podcast. So I was so excited when you came across my desk and your information came. I said, yes, we need to talk about this. So welcome.
So sweet, April. And thank you very much for your interest and inviting me. And yes, sex needs to be more talked about.
Yes.
So it's awesome that I can contribute to that with you. Yes.
Yeah. So let our listeners know just a little bit more about your background and how you kind of went from being a lawyer to now, talking about sex and mindfulness.
It was an organic kind of process. I trained as a lawyer, born in apartheid South Africa, wanted to do something that was valuable for the people who are not so privileged and oppressed. But when I actually had completed my law training, I realized there was actually very little that I could do as an individual in such a difficult country. Anyway, so I decided to go for massage, and I always had a good feeling for touching people and massage and so on. And that led to an interest in making love, of course. And I just started personally experimenting. I used some guidelines, from an Australian man called Barry Long and an Indian person, a master called Osho. And these, I just put little suggestions into practice, and I was just blown away, like what an impact that made. By being more mindful, paying more attention to actually what was happening between the bodies, within my own body. So I experimented for many years, and 5-6 years. And then people started coming to me and asking me about sex, and I found that I could easily talk about it. So one thing kind of led to another. I started teaching, I started writing books. So now I've been teaching couples for 25 years here, basically in Europe, been to Australia as well. Very organic, no big goal. And so myself, I'm quite surprised to end up in this situation where I am, able to talk about sex in an informed way, can we say, or in another way. Yes, here I am with you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Wonderful. I'm really excited to get into our topics today. Now, I know that you've written other books, and this book is actually written for teenagers to give them kind of a basis, which I think is really beautiful. One, I think it's really hard for some parents sometimes to even know when is the right time to introduce this topic, this conversation. How do you, talk to your child about it? Some people might wait until they come into adolescence. And I know you wrote this more for like the 14, 15-year-olds, but a lot of adults are reading this book, and I got a lot out of it, and I'm in my 40s. So,
Right. Yes, a younger person can read any of my other books and get something from it, but this was like really more condensed and from a slightly different perspective. that hopefully, suits more the young people's mind. 14 to 25. But, what I've noticed in my retreats where I have books on display, because it's also in 3 other languages, German, French, and Spanish, people now just in English, the adults are reading it, avidly. So why is important to catch people when they're younger? Because the younger, the better, that people get alternative inputs, because then it gives options.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, the style that we have and enjoy is pretty much along one track. So it's to create a balance for that and just give other ideas that then younger ones can grow into. Younger ones are a little more fluid in the body. Not necessarily, sometimes there's, through pornography and so on, there's quite strong ideas. But what I've noticed in my retreats for couples, and I've had couples from 18, 19 years old to 80 years old.
Wow.
And
it's a broad range.
Yes. And the thing is, information actually suits everybody. So it's not like for young people, it's different to women, it's different to men. So that's why actually all my books essentially have the same material, and it's just the perspective that changes. But what I have observed in my workshops over the years is that the older one is, the more fixed the psyche is. More fixed the ideas or the attachment to a certain style or a certain way of expressing oneself sexually. So, the value of, just getting different inputs that one can play with, the younger the better, basically. Yeah.
All right, so let's start letting our audience know what is the difference between these two concepts that you have in your book, hot sex and cool sex. I think people may resonate more with the hot sex because that seems to be what is given to us in movies. We're kind of very focused, goal oriented, as you say, with hot sex on the orgasm, making sure people reach that climax. And cool sex takes a much, much different approach. So I'd like you to be able to tell us the difference between the two.
Yes. Essentially the difference is about sexual temperature. And as you say, our imprinting that we get in many different levels is about raising the temperature. And to raise the temperature, we need to get more and more into sensation and intensity and build it up to the climax, which works for some people, but for some people it doesn't work. But so the cool sex is to cool things down. Not to immediately, like you said, work for the goal, go for the end, but rather to take time to enjoy the process, or the journey. And this requires mindfulness and awareness. And that's what makes it so interesting, because the moment we bring, attention, normally we're kind of a bit on our partner, but the moment we come more in and down and anchor ourselves inwardly, then it's more like we're coming from the inside out, connected with ourselves. So that mindfulness, or the word I've always used is awareness, that changes the act completely. Something as simple as that, just paying more attention to what you're doing, how you're doing it. So this also creates a lot of slowness, that awareness, that being more conscious slows everything down. And then when things get slower, then we are more in the moment. We're not ahead of ourselves. So then real intimacy and connection can build up. And the other thing with more awareness is that ejaculation can be delayed. And this is one of the major obstacles with the hot variety, is that it very quickly leads to ejaculation. And many, many men and, younger people suffer. And it is a suffering, from premature ejaculation. because there's this feeling of not having performed enough, there's something wrong with them, self-doubt. And then often the other partner, now I'm talking about heterosexuals, but it can be any combination. Often they're not satisfied, especially in the hetero, because women's body takes a little more time to kind of get in the groove. And this is, again, not psychological, it's just how we are. So one can extend the sexual exchange for a long time if one just stays in the moment, stays present, suggest things like scanning the body, softening, because actually if you look in the hot style, the body gets more and more compressed. And then all our senses get compressed. So what we're looking for is more like expanded experiences, because the expanded experiences are the ones that touch us, that leave a flavor and a feeling of satisfaction within you. So if you keep, relaxing the jaw, shoulders, belly, also the pelvic floor, the buttocks, all this has an impact on the sexual exchange. And we might think, well, what's your shoulder got to do with your genitals? It's got a lot to do with it. We tend to divide the body in parts. There's this part, that part, that part, but the body in itself is one unity. So any pressure we can take out from different corners, you suddenly can have a good breath. And that's another thing, you pay more attention to the breathing, and that also keeps you, more in your body, more in the moment. So it's really, it's not against the hot style. It's more to balance the hot style. And even if one brings awareness into the hot style, that's also going to change that,
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's this, I think I've said it already, it's not what you do, but how you do it.
Yeah. So, I have so many questions and so many things that I found fascinating too. But I do want to make a point, and you had made a point earlier too, that, your experience and how you've written the book is through heterosexual, but that this could be applied to any genders that are being intimate with each other. So do you want to talk a little bit about that before I get into my roll of questions?
Yes. Look, this is an important aspect. I work from my experience, so that's why I teach hetero. At the same time, many of the principles can be incorporated. Awareness, mindfulness, breathing, scanning, softening the body, learning to be more present. So in that sense, other gender combinations, the genital specificness might not work, but so it has to be adapted. But the general principles definitely are a great bonus, because it builds intimacy. And often people engage in sexual union, but afterwards they feel a bit disconnected. After the climax, they're very involved, and then there's a feeling of disconnection. But when you lengthen the whole thing through awareness and more conscious movement, not being so mechanical, this it builds connection. It builds bonding. Whereas actually, if we do look, often after sex, we feel a bit disconnected. So it kind of heals that gap that many people experience afterward. So yes, April, really valuable for other gender combinations as well. Yeah. It's about body awareness, and the body is the vehicle, regardless of who your partner is. And this is, body awareness is one thing that we are not much educated in.
And speaking about the body awareness, one of the things that comes to mind is one of the diagrams that you had in the book about the positive and negative of, the male and female body, and where that charges positively and negatively. And, even when you just think about energy, in general, or batteries, and where you have to plug them in.
Right.
So can you talk about the energetic charges of the positive and the negative aspects of the body? And when I say negative, I don't mean negative, but you
Yes.
can
Yes.
explain that. Yeah.
Yes. Um, it's basically inside our bodies, we have like a magnet, with a positive pole and a negative pole, as you say, not evaluations, but like a magnet. Um, and in the male body, it's different to the female body. So the positive pole is the energy raising pole. So that's where energy is raised from in the body. And in man, the energy raising pole is in the perineum area at the base of the penis. And in women, it's in the breasts. And this is a big shift from what we can say mainstream sex or conventional understanding, because we consider, for women, that the clitoris is the center of female sexuality. But actually, this creates more like excitement and tension and wanting to go somewhere. So for women, and good for men to know that, or two women partners together, that when we start to tune into the breasts, and I don't mean stimulation or titillation, but really start to feel the breasts from inside, this opens up the sexual energy or the body energy, because it's one and the same thing, on a much deeper level. That then enables the whole exchange to be prolonged and more interesting and delightful, because there's a real energetic connection. And so you've got like two magnets, in the hetero case, meeting at opposite ends. And so can be a circulation between the bodies. But most importantly, and this, it's not so much about what happens between the bodies, but what happens in your body. So that's where, if there's same sex combination, you circulate energy in yourself, and that is important.
Yeah. Good point. The other thing that I found really fascinating when you were kind of talking about the energy within our bodies, that sometimes building up the energy prior to the orgasm and not orgasming, I don't even know if that's a word, orgasming, not having the orgasm, that actually it can be more like revitalizing and give you more energy, because and I never thought about it in this way, but you had talked about, and it might have been more on the focus of the male at first, the part of the book where like there's a lot of energy that expels from a man when the ejaculation happens, and the way that you wrote it and described it, to think about all of that power and all of that energy staying within, and you said that you could actually have a lot more energy in those experiences. I was like, wow, that's really interesting, because the other thing that came to mind, and I think you touched on it too in the book, is that I think sometimes we can become so over-focused on this goal of reaching this orgasm, like you said, and people can get their minds totally just engrossed in that. And like you said, if maybe somebody doesn't reach the orgasm, then the other partner's feeling like I didn't satisfy. Or if the other one, reaches it too quickly, well, then maybe I failed my partner because, they didn't reach it with me, or they're not orgasming together. It's like everyone's so focused on this orgasm. And then to hear it in these terms and thinking about it more of our personal energy that can build, and that it can, I think I might be getting something that I read with yours confused, but like building up within the chakras and kind of bringing the energy up to the crown chakra, that it can be very just, revitalizing and bring you so much more energy, where a lot of times after people orgasm, they feel exhausted and they want to go to sleep. So I was hoping you could go into a little more explanation about what is actually happening if we decide to hold that orgasmic energy in our bodies and not let that come out.
Well, then, it expands through the body. So it's like, instead of going, it's like inverting the energy. But what is important, just at the outset, to say that it's men, if they build up a classic way to prolong sex is to build up tension, essentially, then repress it, build it up and then repress it, point of no return, back again. But this is actually in the long term not healthy because it creates congestion in the genital area. And then often men will have sore testicles through that method afterwards. So that means congestion. So it's more to have a little movement or excitement, one can say, and then relax. A little and then relax. And then through the relaxation, this inverts and starts to expand through the body. And we don't, when I say we, my partner and I, we don't teach this or trying to raise it in any way. You just let the body do it. Your job is to not leak it out or not let it go. To hold it in. But like I say, not in a way that is this building up intensity, repressing. For women, of course, that doesn't apply so much that they will get pain after. But often women do report that even getting intensely excited brings pains into the vagina. So, it's funny when one word use the words relaxation, people think, oh, that sounds ridiculous. But relaxation is not collapse or being dead. It's really kind of being more in the body, in and down, we call it, and softening. And then, the body has its own intelligence. So it's a bit we need to give it back to the body, because actually this orgasm thing, yes, it's definitely part of reproduction, that's clear, but it's become very much imprinted that is why we have sex.
Right.
It's the reason we have sex. So this is what's really good to break away from that. This is why we're doing it. And it's an option. You can have an orgasm, you can have a peak or not. And if you don't, you definitely will feel really fully alive afterwards. And, this bond, this connection stays. Not this kind of totally involved and then totally uninvolved and, like you say, sleeping and so on. But that connection and love, that it flows with you. And also you don't have this loss of energy that then one has to, for younger people, it's usually easier, but older people, it takes a while for you to get interested in your partner again. But like this, you keep the flow going, and you're more available to have sex sooner. So yeah, the best way to move forward is just to a little excitement. Now, normally when we feel excitement, we just keep building and building and building and building on that to the peak. So when things, just when you feel the temperature coming up a little bit, you relax and expand. And, engage again, and a little excitement, and then relax. And then, like I use the word invert, it kind of starts to not just go in one direction, but goes internally. And we don't, I doubt if you'll find in any of my books the word chakra even. I find that it a little gives people a bit too much mind ideas. Mm-hmm. Trust the body, contain the energy in a relaxed way, and the energy will do the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're that in touch with it, you can feel where the energy is flowing, because there is this pure, like we were talking about the mindfulness, you're just so in the moment with every sensation and every feeling that's happening.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think too, the two words that really resonated with me, and really understanding the difference of your description between the hot sex and the cool sex, is this goal-oriented versus connection. And I remember another thing that I thought was pretty interesting was the way that you described when each partner is having their orgasm. It can be, selfish isn't the right word. it's where the focus becomes very inward, and there's a little bit of this disconnect with your partner because you're focused on your body, reaching that climax. And I also thought that was interesting. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that because, I mean, clearly my partner doesn't know what it feels like for my body to go through that, and there is usually some sort of focus that can happen as, you're being pleasured and your body is beginning to rise, like you said, and that energy coming to that. And then you become so focused on yourself of having that happen. And so it was really interesting. Again, you just are bringing up these concepts that I think happen, but we're not really giving any thought or mind to it. And how the cooler sex, when you are taking things a lot slower and you're paying a lot of attention, and if the orgasm happens, great. If it doesn't, if it turns into hot sex, wonderful. But there really is always, when you go into it with the cool sex, it seems like this connection always stays, as opposed to just like jumping in and having this hot sex. So I was hoping you can talk a little bit about this like internal experience that we're having with that orgasm that might create a little bit of that disconnect with our partner.
Well, it's really, as you, kind of describe it, everybody gets focused on reaching their goal. So, you go into and do what you can to raise the energy, to bring it to a peak. When there's more mindfulness, also one very good thing that is suggested in all my books is to have eye contact. Mm-hmm. Now, usually people close the eyes and kind of go into their own movie, or they make love in the dark. So it's really good to have light and to be able to have eye contact, because that keeps you present. Especially if fantasy is used. It's very hard to have a fantasy with your eyes open.
Right.
So in the conventional sense, if each of you is going for the climax, you can still do that with the eyes open. And, if there's no fantasy involved, and that helps the bonding in that moment. Mm-hmm. It helps you to be more present to what's happening, and it's more of a shared experience, even if only one comes, at least there's a connection. But with the eyes, it's I've been teaching this, for 25 years, is more to have what we call a receptive vision, not the outward vision. Now we tend to look out of our eyes. So that means we're kind of up and out and on the other person. Now, when we do that, there's always a bit of judgment and critique involved. It's just the nature of that kind of looking. So I've been teaching inverted vision or soft vision, where more, you have this connection in the body, and then you let things come to you. So it's more you receiving through the eyes rather than looking out the eyes. Mm-hmm. And I always use the word, let the eyes be inviting. So that little shift in how one uses the eyes makes a huge difference, because if we like checking each other out, then you feel, a bit weird.
Right. Or self-conscious, or, oh, how does my body look like? Or, yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's a lot about inverting, the senses, through here, also the breath. Normally in conventional style, we breathe very short and shallow. So you invert that and start to breathe, direction, solar plexus, belly, direction, genitals. And all this enhances the body awareness and especially the body energy, as you were talking about.
Right.
So it's like we have to enter ourselves on many different levels.
Yeah.
But it really makes it's just, it makes a difference. You feel, actually better as a person, more trusting of your own body, more confidence in your body and your senses. So it brings around quite a lot of changes on a personal level. not just in sex. So then how you move through your life will be more from the inside out. Not always so like concerned about image or how you look, but it's more when you start to feel your body and gain access to like the fine, delicate vibrations in the body. This has a radiance of its own. And that then also has a impact on the people around you and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things, so I'm reading your book. When I was reading your book, I was reading it as an adult. And then I was thinking about, my gosh, what would it have been like if I was 14, 15, 16 and reading this then? And, I think that the beautiful part of it, it just seems like if we're able to teach people younger and introduce them to this into intimacy, there also seems to be a level of more consent. And, if you are this mindful and really honoring your partner in this way and taking like all of them in, it also makes me wonder if there would be less instances either of rape that happen, boundaries not being violated, and just this whole thing of consent that's happening. Because with the cool sex that you are describing and kind of teaching people in the book, and again, like you said, the focus was 14 to 25. I just think that it changes the culture.
April, that is really such a profound insight, because it really is like this. For so long, we've been in this certain rut or road with sex, which is ultimately not fulfilling. And there's always, wanting it again and again and the same again and again. And then it does lead to, crossing of boundaries, because people start to reach for it in other ways or other places, and overpowering people. It would absolutely change the culture. There is no doubt about that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And, I remember listening to your TED Talk, and I laughed a little bit thinking if I was going to say, hey, to some of my friends, who have been married for a long time, and say, you got to read this book, you got to watch this TED Talk. And why I giggled a little bit, you were like, set 3 hours aside. And I was like, okay, there's no way some of my best friends who are married that have kids are going to have this block of 3 hours unless they send the kids away, they have somebody that's watching them. But you kind of really emphasized about taking things slow and really making this space. Now, I've done couples therapy, for many years. I'm not doing it so much now, but one of the things that really lacks, I think, with people's intimate connection and what's going on in their relationships is that they're not taking the time. They're not putting the time aside. Everyone's like, they almost feel forced to have to take a date night. Like, oh, we have to schedule this in and pencil it in. And, it's like, okay, to actually schedule 3 hours where you're not going to rush through sex. You're not having it in the closet before the kids come home, or if they're downstairs or whatever, but you're really like kind of setting up sacred space and time to allow this to happen. But I know some people would say 3 hours. What's this woman talking about? There's no way. Do you know what my schedule is like? But there is something in the way that you describe it of slowing things down, like you said, cooling the temperature and slowing things down. So all of these things that you're describing can happen. That sets and holds the space for this mindfulness and this connection to happen between two people.
Yes. If you carve out the time, then you also enter that space more consciously, which then makes it special or sacred or touching. 3 hours is good, but 2 hours is also okay, an hour. But I do think that, sex is happening very accidentally. Essentially, you just like kind of dive on each other in a little gap, or when you're both feeling a bit horny or whatever. But if you really, set some time, you have to prioritize, because ultimately what you are doing is you're talking about love.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have make love or have sex with awareness, it actually generates love. And so it just needs to be given some space, because I know parents are very hard pressed, with children to find time for themselves. But reality is that the vibration of love that exists between the parents is food for the children.
Mm.
So that is so important, that the children can feel that love vibration. Children, and I'm talking about even little babies and up to teenagers and so on, they are very, very tuned in to the vibration between the parents. Now, often it turns toxic, a bit of blaming, and there are reasons for that. But then the children go into fear, and then they start to shrink. But if they can feel this love vibration between the parents, something deeply relaxes inside the children, and then they become easier to manage.
Mm.
The children are more self-contained because they're in a held space. So one does need to get babysitters.
Well, I'm sure that there's some people probably listening thinking, oh my God, how long has it been since I've had sex with my partner, and thinking about their children now, and if there is, not saying that there needs to be sex all the time, but like you said, there is an energy and a bond that I feel like, even if, say, couples haven't been intimate with one another for a while, but then when that creation happens again, I've had couples say, yeah, things just kind of run smoother for a couple of weeks afterwards, So like you said, it's palpable. That energy is palpable.
Right.
And the other thing too, I think when you're saying like set up the space, set up the time, I think it's okay for people to plan their sex in an essence. Like, it doesn't always have to be spontaneous. Spontaneous can be fun, but I remember you saying in the book, like, if you were to tell a man, okay, we're going to have sex, in 3 days around 8:00, I scheduled the babysitter. You had to mention something like, now the man isn't walking around, all day thinking about, when am I going to have sex? When am I going to have sex? And for women, we tend to, with the way that our minds work, planning for us works really well, because then there can be a prepping. We can make ourselves feel beautiful, or maybe we'll pick out a certain outfit. And there's a lot of mental activity that goes into kind of planning for sex for women to, be ready. I'm not saying all, but, the way that we think about it, like you said, it takes the woman's body a little longer to kind of heat up and rev up, that I think it's okay if it's not spontaneous all the time. And it is something that you set aside specific time for.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to do that, because you say, let sex be spontaneous, but actually it's accidental.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's different.
Right.
Yeah. So, but if you plan it, then it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just a much more awareness is brought, like you say, you make stuff beautiful, or you make a beautiful space, and then you enter it much more consciously. And then this makes a huge, huge difference, because that's actually what we're trying to introduce, that is not happening, just maybe, but it is happening. And it brings tremendous relaxation, especially to the man, but also to the woman, because this is, women's attention as mothers and so on is very spread. Many, many things to take care of in the environment, the home environment and so on. And so what happens is often this feeling of not feeling connected to the partner, because there's no time to be together. It's all kind of incidental, changing over, whatever is involved, getting kids to school and so on. So it does give a good foundation. You make a date and you keep to the date. And even if, we have this kind of strong idea that we have to, feel all excited and horny or whatever to enter sex. But actually, the bodies are happy to make love. We don't have to wait until we're hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
And it's more often the minds are not so happy with, oh gosh, now I have to make love. But if you lie around and caress and touch and kiss and, you know, have eye contact and very slowly awaken to the thing and go into it, you just access yourself and the connection on a much, much deeper level. And it has, it's fulfilling. And I think that's the big difference, because while we might, we've covered this already a little bit before, but while our peak or our climax might be amazing, we never really check how we feel after. And after is this feeling of sudden disconnection, usually. Of course, we are talking in generalizations. Man goes to sleep, woman feels a little bit kind of left out the loop kind of thing, or sometimes a bit abandoned or a bit sad. So there are consequences as to how we manage our body energy, our sexual energy. Yeah.
Yeah. I was also hoping, too, that you can touch upon the myths. You highlighted a couple of different myths that some people have, and, you kind of integrated that in talking about the men's anatomy and, certain things that I think what I'm thinking of is like how the man can still enter the woman without having a full erection, that, that doesn't need to be, maintained all the time. And you were kind of giving tips on how that can, be accomplished. And there were a couple of other myths too that you had highlighted in the book. And I thought that might be good to talk about as well.
Yes. Basically, in our kind of imprinting, our understanding is we can only have sex if there is erection. And so this is also why the stress, the performance pressure for man, and having to, get an erection. So therefore you need excitement, you need stimulation, you need fantasy, because only then you can enter woman. And then there's a tremendous fear of loss of erection, because that's related with impotence or not being man enough. So that's why we, generally speaking, keep all this mechanical movement up to maintain the erection. But it's the penis can relax. Sometimes he can't handle this all this stimulation, so often the penis will just kind of like withdraw. So there is definitely a possibility that a man can enter a woman with a relaxed penis. So if a man can't produce an erection, and even that word produce just shows that it's like man's job to get it together. Women we can help, but ultimately is his. And there is a tremendous prevalence of erectile dysfunction, and it's coming down into the younger people also. So then comes a lot of self-doubt and, many kind of personal complexes and so on. But if we just understand that, that this is an organ that it's highly intelligent, and the more we can just let it relax and take the pressure off it, then it can start to respond in more organic ways. So yes, there is this possibility to, it takes a little practice, but the woman can put the man in soft. We always suggest lubrication anyway. And then, of course, it is a slightly different experience, because it's not intense. It requires one to bring the awareness down to a more fine level, but that is very nourishing. And, one can actually be like this, I say soft, but that's an evaluation. I prefer, with a soft penis, I prefer to say a relaxed penis. You can lie like that for a long time, and it's very nice. Sometimes the psyche is not so happy. But it's psyche that's kind of the problem. Our mind's a bit of the problem. But also, when in the hetero case, when there's this genital union, in a relaxed way, and the couple are stay present and breathe and have eye contact, or you can even, communicate what you're feeling, not so much on a, more on a sensory level, like delicate vibrations. And when a couple is really truly present, then it's really like a miracle that the penis will, I don't want to create expectations or anything, but it is a reality that happens between male and female genitals, that the penis starts to rise of its own accord. And I do this movement because it's like a snake. It winds its way up into the vagina, and it stays, provided you are present.
Mm.
So it doesn't require any, mechanical movement or maintaining the level of sensation. So there's many, things, like you say, myths, that get broken down, which is incredibly relaxing, in the long run. Another myth is this size of penis and size of breasts.
Mm-hmm.
It's all nonsense, basically. If you're thinking just of heat and sensation, then maybe it makes a difference. In my experience, it doesn't. But if you really come down to the sensitivity and the senses and working on the senses, it's how alive you are to yourself that makes a difference. And this emphasis on big breasts, that's just from the outside. So there's this whole breast enhancement culture. But can you feel them from the inside? That is what is going to make a difference, not just that they are large from the outside. So I know some women with small breasts think, I'm not really a woman, but it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, do you have the capacity to enter that part of your body and, open to that part? And then that then opens your body energy. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you give a great little kind of meditation for people to do in the book. I'm not going to give that away because I want them to get the book. My other thought too is I bet that there are probably people who have read your book. They've listened to your talks. They might listen to this podcast and they might be saying, well, my gosh, how do I introduce this to my partner? How do I introduce this concept? I want to try this, but how do I actually explain it and, initiate this type of conversation? So can you give anybody any bit of help or tips to open up this conversation to their partner?
It can be difficult, in the sense that one person is very fixed in how they like to have it. But, we just have to talk from our hearts and share that you want to experiment, and how about a little adventure, and also to realize that every time we have sex is pretty much the same way every time. And it's good to, if there is an openness, to actually study some material together, read a book together, or watch a TED talk together, and just be adventurous. I mean, we're not very adventurous with sex, and that's a reality. We want to have the same thing every time. And as soon as one starts to appreciate, these little tweaks in the whole picture have an impact on what I feel, how I feel afterwards, how I feel about my partner. So, yeah, I mean, I wish there was like a little button that we could all, a little switch we could flick, and just everybody would be open to the idea. But not everybody is, and I find that a shame. Like I say, we're not very adventurous. We're happy to do all kinds of adventurous things, bungee jumping and paragliding and rafting, but are we open to actually see how we cruise together, in sex? One thing is for sure, is that if one partner starts to be a little bit more present, starts to be a little bit more conscious, it often I can't guarantee it, will have an impact on the other partner. And that's one of the kind of the alchemies of awareness, of consciousness. That if I suddenly, don't rush for my orgasm, I stay more present, that will slow the other person down. So that's the other way, that if there's one partner who's really interested and the other one not, then just in little ways, soften your body, breathe more deeply, be more present. And yeah, like I said, there's this alchemy that if one person is more present, then it creates it draws the other one, into the moment. So, yeah, but I mean, the best is really to try and just find the spirit of adventure and curiosity, because that's actually the only reason I'm sitting here today with you was curiosity. One thing led to another. And try to read some information, so that you both, I don't say the word functioning, but operating or moving ahead in a slightly informed way.
Yes.
And also, it's also a thing of expectation management. We make a change and we suddenly want it to be amazing. Well, it's not going to be like that. So if you come in with your expectations, that already blows the story. So, essentially what it is to becoming more innocent. So we have lost sexual innocence. In other words, this playful, more childlike, and I don't mean children, I mean just innocent. With no expectations, just more simple. And definitely through teaching couples so long, I see how that works, and how people just feel more themselves, because they're not pretending, they're not projecting, they're not trying to be a great lover. They're just being human.
Right.
Just more simple. And I think the word innocence really, it wraps it up, because with all the movies and the pornography, and also the fact that sex is kept very much under the carpet, like you said in the beginning, some parents don't know how to raise the subject with their young ones, or what I've heard. I don't have children, and that was a conscious choice. Children don't even want to imagine that their parents are having sex.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if we just bring it down to a more innocent human level of exploration, and just, like we might learn basketball, or, and that's something that I wanted to say earlier, was that, all our education is in the mind, and when it is the body, it's usually gymnastics or some kind of a sport, but not really how to stand. Most people stand really badly. Most people walk really badly. Most people sit badly. So if I'm just collapsed there with my, like this, of course I'm going to feel lousy. But the minute I kind of, come into my center, get it, feel my spine, and you're suddenly more present, you feel better in your body. So we're not taught in schools or as children, how to be more conscious in the body. Everything we do is a little bit mechanical. So naturally in sex, we're going to be mechanical. Mm-hmm. We clean our teeth, but if you start to feel, it changes the whole thing. Or you're cooking and you're stirring like this, but if you, really start to stir, with awareness, you're just more in the present.
Well, thank you, Diana. This really was such a refreshing conversation. I'm so glad we finally talked about sex on the Path 11 podcast. So can you let our listeners know where they can find more information about you, your website, and your books?
Yes, please. Most of my books are available on Amazon. I'll just show you the cover of the Cool Sex book, if I may.
Yeah.
It's this. And actually, I co-authored it with a girlfriend because she had young people. I didn't have young people. So she came to one of my seminars and she wanted to write a book. So we kind of did that together. My website is www.livinglove.com. Livinglove.com. And there you'll see, all the books, some are translated into other languages, German, French, Spanish, Russian, and so on. But yeah, so look, April, it's been lovely.
Same here. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your beautiful insights and questions. This really was a great contribution.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Share it with people, share it with your partners. And I hope all of you are going to try some cool sex after you hear this podcast. So take care, everyone.
Okay. And if I could just say, if you want to watch the TED Talk, it's called The Power of Mindful Sex. And that gives you, in 17 minutes, quite a little bit of input and things to play with.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes as well for people.
Okay, super. Thank you, April.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Ciao, ciao.